Okay, so in this video, I wanted to share one of the things that made the biggest difference for me personally in learning how to learn skills and get really good at things. And what I'm about to explain to you is something I found in a very unlikely place. I've always been a very motivated person to try to improve myself in every way I can, in many different ways. And obviously, I used to work in sales and whatnot. Like, I've read a lot of books on many different subjects, but particularly on confidence, because it's a big deal. And it's, comes to factor in how people judge you, how you're perceived, the opportunities you're given. So I read, a good number of the most famous and most well revered books on confidence. But one thing I really didn't expect is, I know these videos I'm making are on skill development. I also read a lot of books on skill development purely. Like an example on these would be like Peak by Eric Anderson or Eric Anders. Like, I forget that exact author. But what really surprised me is books on confidence, particularly several ones, actually didn't have as much to do with confidence like I expected, but offered the mental framework and tools I was really looking for from those other types of books about skill development. So some of the concepts and mental tools that helped me the most I learned from books on confidence, which was really surprising to me. It was something I didn't expect at all. But also, a lot of the best books on confidence is kind of like a buzzword, right? Because when you dig into these books, if your confidence is just like a ploy to try to look better for other people to socially manipulate them, that's like a really weak foundation and can be seen through anyway. So confidence is really setting your mind up and your way of being to be apt for challenges in a difficult life or difficult tasks, and being able to thrive in them. But every author or book takes a really different approach to this. So what's also interesting is a lot of the different books I've read on confidence have totally different ideas and are actually about totally different things. But one of the things in one of these books helped me the most, which is it's this book. It's called The Six Pillars of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Branden. And what this book is about is, this is what, like, one of the last books Nathaniel Branden wrote when he was really old. And I believe he was a psychologist that would, help people and try to troubleshoot their problems. He would counsel people or treat them or help them, right? But his whole career, obviously, he dealt with some people that were very high functioning, very healthy, had their life all together, and many people who were the exact opposite, that had all kinds of baggages, addictions, self-sabotaging tendencies, would just blow up their own life over and over again and had no ability to get it together. But he was very passionate about understanding what was the difference between these two kinds of people. I know it's like not just one extreme or the other, it can be a spectrum. And in his whole career, he identified for himself 6 major patterns that dictated whether a person would be somebody who had their life all ticked and tied all together, solid relationships, did well at their careers, actually did the things they set out to do, or if they were just a total fuck up, basically. And these are the 6 pillars of self-esteem. So what's interesting is the book is not about self-esteem. It's actually how to be a competent human and live life effectively. And therefore, if you do those things, you will actually just automatically have self-esteem as a result. That's the point of the book. So what's interesting is the book really isn't about self-esteem. It's just how to have these 6 patterns ingrained in you and help you live life well and effectively. But I'm going to talk about pillar 1, and that's the pillar of living consciously. And this is also a very academic book. It's very dry. So, if you choose to read it, if the idea of that appeals to you, I think you really have to kind of state it in your own words and ideas as you read it to get the most out of it. But to distill down what that is, pillar 1, the pillar of living consciously, or the act of living life consciously. Our conscious brain is just basically our frontal lobe. It's a very small part of our brain, and most of how we operate is dictated by our subconscious mind mainly our feelings, our impulses, our genetic tendencies, our emotions, right? And even though we think we're going through life understanding what's going on, understanding what we're doing, we're really just being pushed by these things and doing things over and over. And the big main test for this is if you were to ask somebody, like, hey, why did you do this thing you did? Like, or why did this thing you mess up? Like, why did that really happen? Or if somebody's involved in a skill or a craft, like in that match you just had, give me a breakdown of that match and exactly how it went. And what you'll find is a lot of people, even yourself, if you kind of test yourself like this, they can't do this. Like, you'll do something and then you don't have any like conscious recollection of what just occurred. You can't like complete a match and just say, oh, would this happen, then this happened, and then I responded with this, and then this happened. You kind of just autopilot and blank out. And in the book, it's living differently in this way, covers everything from figuring out yourself and your own tendencies and your emotions, but also external things like your interactions with your job or other people, or in this case, we're going to talk about like skill development. So it seems like it's something so simple and it seems obvious, but like I've said before, we don't do it. I challenge you to, after you engage in a session of whatever craft you're trying to get good at, like, can you explain clearly all the things that happened in one of your sessions or your match, right? And it's more of a discipline thing. I would, it sounds simple, but it's a lot like losing weight. Like, a lot of people, just like getting good at things, a lot of people, get overweight and they want to lose weight, but only a small percentage of people can actually, or a smaller percentage of people can actually do it, or they have to get to a breaking point to actually do it. And I think what goes on is a lot of these people, they're just beating around the bush. They're like, oh, I'll do keto, or I'll cut carbs, or this or that, when really what you have to do is very straightforward and simple. You have to take in less calories than you consume, and your body scientifically has to burn off fat. And then if you stick to that day by day by day, losing weight is literally like impossible to not do if you follow that. And learning skills is the same. In my other video, I explained how you don't want to project onto reality and do what you think will work, do what you think is smart. You want to learn from reality and understand it and learn how to work with the rules of reality better in whatever task you're doing. This is the deep dive or kind of details of how exactly that looks. So it's really just a very simple formula, and you go into a session or an attempt and you have an idea of how it's going to go. You have an idea of what you want to do, how it's all going to play out, and it almost never goes exactly like that, but it's on you to actually soak in what exactly is going on a conscious level while it's happening, and leave the session and be able to say, ABC happened, and I thought it would result in, EFG, but it didn't. And that's surprising. So next time I'm going to try to do XYZ instead of ABC, right? And I'm just using like random variables, but you want a clear understanding of what happened, and a good test for that is if somebody asks you if you could explain exactly to them what happened, or if you could go over it in your own mind and explain it to yourself, and then there's trial or error. You're gonna succeed or fail, and if you fail, you think about that, you mentally digest it and try to understand why or exactly how, and then given that, you come back with a different approach for next time. And it's really, that's all there is. For a lot of my life, I overcomplicated learning things and getting good at things, but that's the majority of it. There's some other nuances or edges you can get or ways you can approach things more effectively, but that's just the majority of it. I would say another metaphor that comes to mind is there was this kids museum called Body World, and there's a maze in that museum where it's totally dark in there. It's just pitch black. And you have to get through the maze. It's supposed to teach you what it's like to be a blind person. And getting good at any skill is like that, because it's kind of like an extra dimension, right? Like when you start a skill, there's all these things you could do and all these things they can do, and the way those interact will always have kind of similar results every time, but that you're blind to that. You can't see that. So you engage in trial and error, like keep in mind this example of the maze. You're bumping into walls, and then you just kind of figure out over time how it's all laid out, how it's all mapped out, how it all works. And I think most of the way a lot of normal people learn that don't put a lot of effort into learning how to learn skills and approach it efficiently is they just bump into the same wall over and over and over and over, like hundreds of times, until they've done it so many times that it's almost like obvious to not do that thing. And that's the way a lot of people approach things. I think if you asked a lot of guys who are engaged in golf or bowling, if you would say, hey, how did your last 5 throws go, or how did your last 5 shots go, they wouldn't be able to tell you, you know. So every rep you want to have a reflection, see how it went versus how you expected it to go, and reflect on that and contemplate what that means for your next attempt in a similar situation. Right? I think some are more simple, like for like golf, darts, whatever, like it's just simply realizing how the ball or the object is coming off your hand or your club and connecting that to the sensations of your body. But there's some things like what I'm engaged in jiu-jitsu that can be a bit more strategic, and you can draw more broad concepts and strategies that make a lot of different techniques and situations work from reflecting on this. So yeah, it's definitely a willpower thing. It's not easy to do this. Even me, I know people who do this better than me, but it's a must if you want to get better at things faster. And, you know, there's a couple things I wanted to close out on that get in the way of you doing this effectively. And the first is trying your hardest to win. And the reason that is because when you really, it's good in a competition to use what you've already figured out and just go 100%. But a lot of times when you really care about winning, you can't stop your mind from thinking about the things you've already figured out and how to employ that on the other person, right? You almost need to sacrifice some of your brain space to like observe yourself perform and observe the match almost like in a third person perspective to understand what's going on while it's going on. Because if you didn't film it or you don't have some recording of it, you can like blank out on it, right? And then the other is something I'll make another video on, which is struggling with negative emotions associated with failure, because we're actually like much more emotional creatures than we are logical, and a lot of times emotion overrides logic. So if your ego is involved and you're upset, like somebody who isn't as good as you, you know, beat you or got the better of you, or you have any kind of ego flare up, if you check yourself when this happens, you'll realize like it totally clouds your thinking process and it blocks you from being able to reflect on your session, the performance, the situation. So I'll make a whole nother video on that, but because we're more emotional, you have to rewire your brain to see failure as something not negative, but is like literally the only way you figure stuff out and learn what does work. And once you free up any negative emotions behind like failure and being like butthurt by it, basically, you'll be able to engage in this reflection and contemplation like much easier. And yeah, once I learned this, right, it helped me a lot, and it's connected to my first video. It's just this is what learning from trial and error actually looks like, and it sounds simple, but a lot of people don't do it. And if you catch yourself, you can leave sessions without any takeaways, and it's something you have to really focus on every day to make sure that you have specific realizations of what happened, specific ideas for what you think that means, and specific takeaways, and specific things that you're going to do next time differently because of that. And if you stick to that and have the willpower to always employ that way of going about skill development, you're going to get way, way, way better results than if you haven't.